When I turned 85, I began to notice a troubling pattern in my daily life. Simple things, like remembering why I had entered a room, became a challenge. I would find myself standing still in the doorway, scanning the space for any hint that might jog my memory. The names of my grandchildren, once so familiar and dear, would sometimes slip from my mind. Even reading, a lifelong pleasure, became a struggle. I would have to start the same paragraph over and over, unable to retain what I had just read. It felt as though my mind was gradually shutting down, like a light bulb flickering before it finally goes out. In those moments, I truly believed there was no way to reverse what was happening. People around me tried to reassure me, saying it was normal, just a part of getting older, something I had to accept. But deep inside, I resisted. I didn't want to spend my final years feeling lost, confused, and disconnected from the world and the people I love. The thought of each day taking away another piece of my memory filled me with dread. Then, quite unexpectedly, I came across an interview with a doctor discussing the impact of certain foods on brain health. There was no mention of miracle pills or quick fixes, just real, natural foods, the kind that have been part of our lives for generations. According to the doctor, these foods could provide the brain with exactly what it needs to function better. Even in old age, I was skeptical, but I decided to give it a try. I didn't expect much, but to my surprise, something began to change. Gradually, my mind started to feel clearer. I stopped misplacing things as often. I found myself recalling conversations in greater detail. Most importantly, I began to feel present again, as if my mind was truly my own once more. That experience inspired me to share my journey in this video. I want to talk about the 5 foods I started eating every day, and how, when combined with a few small changes in my daily routine, they completely transformed my memory and my overall outlook on life. I'm not a doctor, but I am living proof of the difference these foods can make. I'll also share some of the science behind them, so you can decide for yourself whether you'd like to try them too. I'm not offering empty promises. There are no magical solutions, but I truly believe that small, consistent choices can change everything. If you're watching, I'd love to know how old you are and where you're from. Please share your story in the comments. This transformation didn't happen overnight. It began with small, seemingly insignificant details. At first, I could justify the forgetfulness. Everyone forgets names now and then, I told myself. But soon, I realized it was happening more often, and the lapses were deeper. I vividly remember the first time I couldn't find my keys. I searched everywhere: coat pockets, the kitchen, the bathroom, even the refrigerator. After nearly an hour, I found them on my nightstand, exactly where I always leave them. I laughed it off, but inside a small alarm went off. Then came the repetition. I would start telling my granddaughter a story from my youth, and she would look at me with gentle patience and say, "Grandpa, you already told me that yesterday." I would smile, but inside I felt a pang of sadness. I had no recollection of telling her the story before. How could I be so certain of what I was about to say, yet have no idea I'd already said it? I began to shy away from long conversations, afraid I would lose my train of thought or go blank mid-sentence. Sometimes I would forget what day it was. I'd open a kitchen drawer and not remember what I was looking for. Or I'd find myself in a room with no idea why I'd gone there. The worst part wasn't the forgetfulness itself, but the growing sense that I was slowly disconnecting from who I was. My memory wasn't just another bodily function. It was my story, my choices, my feelings. It was me. Watching it slip away felt like losing a loved one and being powerless to stop it. I was afraid of becoming a burden, of forgetting the faces I cherished, of losing my sense of self. I also felt a deep sense of shame. No one wants to appear confused or out of place, so I started to withdraw, pretending everything was fine. That only made me feel more isolated and alone. It was at my lowest point, when I thought there was nothing left to do, that I decided to try anything and everything. Even if science said cognitive decline was a normal part of aging, I wasn't ready to give up. I didn't expect to become the person I was at that age, but I wanted to hold on to who I was in the present. And so my journey began with a single, simple change, one that would ultimately make all the difference. It was a change that seemed insignificant at first, but in reality, it transformed everything. It began with a simple visit to my doctor, a step I had been putting off for far too long. For months, I convinced myself that everything was fine, that I could handle the forgetfulness and confusion on my own. Admitting that I needed help wasn't easy. There's a certain pride that comes with age, a desire to remain independent and in control. But eventually, I reached a point where I couldn't ignore the mental fog, the memory lapses, and the persistent feeling of being disconnected from myself. These weren't just occasional slip-ups anymore. They had become part of my daily existence. With some trepidation, I finally scheduled an appointment with my primary doctor. He greeted me with his characteristic warmth and understanding, which put me at ease. He asked a series of questions about my health and my recent experiences, carefully reviewing my medical history. Then, he administered a few simple tests for memory, attention, and language. I did my best to answer, but there were moments when my mind went completely blank. On some questions, I responded slowly, searching for the right words. The doctor didn't seem alarmed, but he also didn't give me the reassurance I was hoping for. After the examination, he explained that I didn't show clear signs of Alzheimer's or advanced dementia, which was a relief. However, he diagnosed me with something called mild cognitive impairment. The term itself sounded gentle, almost harmless, but the reality was sobering. He told me that this condition is quite common for people my age. It doesn't always get worse, but there's no cure for it either. His recommendations were familiar. Ones: keep my mind active with puzzles and crosswords, read more often, and engage in conversations with others. He encouraged me to try new hobbies, to learn something I'd never attempted before. He also stressed the importance of regular exercise, good sleep, and managing stress. Of course, he said I should watch for any signs that my symptoms were getting worse. When I asked about medications, he acknowledged that while some exist, he didn't recommend them for me. The side effects could be significant, and the benefits, he admitted, were sometimes unclear. I left the appointment feeling a mix of relief and frustration. Relief because I wasn't facing something more severe. Frustration because it felt like I was being told to accept this as an inevitable part of aging. I didn't want to simply stay active and hope for the best. I wanted more than just maintenance. I wanted to feel better, to reclaim my clarity, my memory, and that vital sense of being truly present in my own life. I wasn't searching for miracles, just for something real and tangible that could make a difference. That's when I decided to take matters into my own hands. I didn't waste time on miracle cures or impossible promises. Instead, I went back to basics and started with my diet. If what we eat can impact every part of our body, I reasoned, why wouldn't it affect the brain as well? This question marked the beginning of a journey that slowly helped me regain what I thought I had lost. One afternoon, while browsing online without any particular goal, I stumbled upon a video featuring a retired neurologist discussing brain aging. She said something that resonated deeply with me. What you eat doesn't just nourish your body, it also feeds your mind. If you choose wisely, you can help your memory stay with you longer. That simple idea sparked my curiosity. I began reading articles, watching educational talks, and searching for scientific studies. I wasn't looking for magic solutions, just practical, evidence-based advice. Among all the information I found, one food kept appearing as a powerful ally for brain health: blueberries. Those small, unassuming fruits I'd often overlooked at the grocery store were actually packed with antioxidants, especially flavonoids, specifically anthocyanins, which give blueberries their deep blue color. These compounds help combat oxidative stress, one of the primary factors that damage neurons over time. Research supported these claims. A study in the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry showed that older adults who ate blueberries daily for 12 weeks experienced notable improvements in short-term memory and learning ability. Another study from the University of Exeter in the UK found that daily blueberry juice enhanced brain function and increased blood flow to the brain in seniors. This wasn't just another health fad, there was real science behind it. The best part was that I didn't need expensive supplements or complicated recipes. Just a handful of fresh blueberries each day was enough, so I decided to try it. I bought a box of blueberries and, for several weeks, made them a part of my morning routine, sometimes mixing them with natural yogurt, sometimes eating them plain. At first, I didn't notice much, but by the second week, something shifted. I felt more alert in the mornings and my memory for daily tasks began to improve. It was a small step, but it marked the beginning of a profound change. Gradually, the mental fog that had clouded my thoughts began to dissipate. The sense of being disconnected, of drifting through my days in a haze, slowly faded. It wasn't a dramatic, overnight transformation, like flipping a switch to flood a room with light. Instead, it was as if the dim lights in my mind were growing brighter, little by little, allowing me to see and feel more clearly with each passing day. What surprised me most was that the changes went beyond just my memory. Not only did I find it easier to recall names, dates, and daily tasks, but my mood also improved. I felt more engaged, more willing to participate in conversations and activities. There was a renewed sense of presence, as if something deep inside me had been reawakened. That was the true beginning of my journey back to myself. It all started with a simple fruit small, unassuming, but with an outsized impact on my life. And with that realization, I knew I couldn't stop there. If a single food could bring about such a positive change, what might happen if I added even more brain-healthy allies to my diet? That was the turning point when my new eating routine began to take shape. I realized that taking care of my memory required more than just eating well occasionally. The real secret was in creating a routine, something I could stick to every single day. Consistency, I discovered, is what truly transforms both body and mind over time. I decided to start with the basics: breakfast. Previously, my mornings consisted of little more than a cup of coffee and maybe a cookie. It was a habit, not a meal, and certainly not one that nourished my brain. Determined to make a real change, I made blueberries the centerpiece of my breakfast, not just an afterthought. My new breakfast routine is simple, but thoughtfully designed. I begin with a bowl of unsweetened natural yogurt, add a generous spoonful of chia seeds, a pinch of chopped walnuts, and a hearty handful of fresh blueberries. Sometimes, I'll slice in half a ripe banana for an extra boost of energy and potassium. The entire meal takes less than 5 minutes to prepare, but the effect it has on my well-being is remarkable. Another important change was setting a fixed schedule. I made a commitment to get up at 8 a.m. every day, even on weekends, and to have breakfast before 8:30. No more waiting until I felt hungry or putting off the first meal of the day. This structure gave my mornings purpose and set a positive tone for the rest of the day. Starting each day with this kind of nutrient-rich food not only kept me full, but also provided a noticeable clarity of mind that lasted throughout the morning. I began to realize that those frustrating blank moments were becoming less frequent. Words came to me more easily, ideas flowed more freely, and even the small details, like remembering which page I'd left off in my book or where I'd put my keys, stopped being a struggle. One morning, for instance, my grandson called to ask for his mother's phone number. Having lost it from his contacts in the past, I might have fumbled through papers or asked him to wait while I searched. But that day, I recited the number from memory, effortlessly, just as I would have years ago. That moment was significant to me, not because it was a monumental achievement, but because it showed me I was reclaiming something I thought I'd lost forever. And the most encouraging part was that this progress didn't come from a pill or an expensive treatment. It was the result of a simple, natural, daily routine. Of course, my efforts didn't end with breakfast. I became more mindful of what I ate throughout the day, choosing less sugar, avoiding white bread, and focusing on more vegetables and healthy fats. But it was that first meal of the day that set everything in motion. If you're experiencing similar struggles, if your mind feels sluggish or your memory isn't as sharp as it once was, don't underestimate the power of a well-crafted eating routine. It may seem like a small change, but it can make a world of difference. After seeing the benefits of blueberries, I knew I was on the right path, but I also understood that no single food could do all the work. I continued my research, watching interviews with neurologists, nutritionists, and longevity experts. A recurring theme emerged: healthy fats are essential for brain health. That's when I discovered my second great ally, avocado. This creamy green fruit, which I once considered a rare treat, turned out to be one of the most powerful yet understated protectors of the brain. Avocado is rich in monounsaturated fats, which play a crucial role in enhancing blood circulation and maintaining the cleanliness and health of our arteries. But why is this important for memory? A well-irrigated brain is one that receives the oxygen and nutrients it needs to function optimally. In addition to these healthy fats, avocado also provides vitamin E, a natural antioxidant, and potassium, which helps regulate blood pressure. All these nutrients work together to reduce the risk of long-term cognitive decline. In fact, several studies suggest that individuals who regularly consume avocado tend to have better attention spans, improved concentration, and faster processing speeds. I began by eating half an avocado each day, no more than that. Sometimes I would spread it on whole grain toast with a few drops of lemon juice. Other times, I mixed it into a salad with tomatoes, onions, and a drizzle of olive oil. I even learned to prepare a smoothie using avocado, banana, and a bit of plant-based milk, a healthy, creamy, and surprisingly delicious treat. What amazed me the most was how quickly my family noticed the difference. One day, my daughter remarked, "Dad, you seem more awake lately, happier and clearer." My granddaughter, who used to get frustrated when I forgot the stories I told her, hugged me after one story and said, "You remembered it all." That was the moment I realized the change was real and not just in my imagination. Avocado wasn't a magical cure, but it became a powerful tool in my journey. Not only did I feel my mind sharpen, but my mood also improved. I experienced less irritability, fewer silly forgetfulnesses, and a greater desire to engage in conversations, go for walks, and read books without losing track. The best part is that avocado is not expensive. You don't need to eat it every day. 3 or 4 times a week is sufficient. However, consistency is key because what you nurture today protects your mind tomorrow. This is how avocado, the silent protector, earned a permanent place in my routine. Through it, I discovered that the path to a clearer mind isn't paved with grand decisions, but with small, consistent habits that gradually transform everything. The brain needs fat, but the right kind. For years, I was afraid of fats. I had been taught that all fats were bad, that they raise cholesterol, cause weight gain, and should be avoided at all costs. So, for a long time, I eliminated fats from my diet. What I didn't realize was that by doing so, I was depriving my brain of the very nutrients it needs to function well. The brain is largely composed of fat, and to stay young, active, and maintain healthy connections, it requires the right kinds of fats. That's when I introduced the third key food into my routine: nuts, especially walnuts and almonds. Walnuts, in many ways, are the perfect food for the mind. Not only do they resemble a brain in shape, but they are packed with omega-3 fatty acids, antioxidants, vitamin E, magnesium, and polyphenols. These compounds work synergistically to protect neurons, strengthen synaptic connections, and enhance communication between brain cells. Almonds, on the other hand, are rich in monounsaturated fats, proteins, and essential minerals. They serve as clean fuel that the brain can use to perform better, especially as we age. Initially, it seemed surprising that such small foods could have such a significant impact, but over time, I noticed the difference. I began to recall more memories from my childhood: exact dates, conversations with my parents, even the smells from the kitchen when I was young. It wasn't that these memories were new. Rather, it felt as if my mind was turning the lights back on in those rooms of the past. One morning, while chatting with my grandson, I spontaneously remembered the full name of my fourth grade teacher and a song we used to sing in class. It wasn't a conscious effort. The memory simply surfaced, as if it had been waiting to be called upon. That moment felt like a precious gift. I started consuming a small handful of nuts every day, nothing excessive, about 5 walnuts and a handful of almonds. Sometimes, I mixed them with yogurt or ate them as a mid-morning snack. They are easy to carry, require no preparation, and have given me a clarity I honestly didn't expect to regain at this stage of my life. There's something else I realized along this journey. I stopped being afraid of the word fat. I learned that the key isn't to eliminate fat from your diet, but to make smarter choices about the types you consume. My cholesterol levels are now better than ever. My energy has noticeably increased, and that persistent mental fog I used to experience in the afternoons has vanished. The brain doesn't thrive on extreme diets or rigid restrictions. It craves balance, proper nutrition, and consistency. If there's one lesson this stage of my life has taught me, it's that it's never too late to start giving both your body and your mind what they truly need to keep shining. Now, let's talk about the fourth food on my list, the sweet treat that actually heals. Many people believe that taking care of your health means giving up all pleasures, especially sweet ones, that in order to feel good, you have to stop enjoying the little things. Over time, I discovered that's not entirely true. There are sweet foods that not only delight your taste buds, but also nourish your body and mind. For years, I avoided sweets out of fear of sugar, fear of energy crashes followed by exhaustion, and the guilt that sometimes followed eating something I enjoyed. But then, while reading an article about brain health in older adults, something caught my eye: dark chocolate. Not just any chocolate. Of course, not the kind filled with milk, sugar, and artificial additives. The article specifically mentioned dark chocolate with at least 70% cocoa as a genuine brain food. Pure cocoa is packed with flavonoids, which are powerful antioxidants. These compounds help improve blood flow to the brain, reduce inflammation, and protect neurons from the damage caused by oxidative stress. In other words, they help the brain remain youthful, alert, and resilient. Additionally, cocoa stimulates the release of endorphins and serotonin, the very substances that lift our mood and promote a sense of well-being. In my own experience, eating a small piece of good chocolate helps me feel more relaxed and cheerful, and I find that it also helps me remember more, stay present, and connect more deeply with what's happening around me. I began a new ritual after lunch each day. I would savor a small square of dark chocolate, letting it melt slowly in my mouth. It became a special moment just for me. And over time, I noticed the benefits. My afternoon anxiety lessened, my focus while reading improved, and I felt more enthusiastic when writing down memories in my notebook. But perhaps the most beautiful moment came one afternoon at home with my grandchildren. We had prepared a simple snack and together some fruit, a handful of nuts, and a few pieces of dark chocolate. We sat on the terrace, chatting and sharing stories. At one point, without even thinking, I recited a story my mother used to tell me when I was a child. I hadn't recalled it in years, didn't even realize I still remembered it. Yet, the words flowed out perfectly, as if someone had illuminated a forgotten corner of my memory. That day, I realized I wasn't just recovering memories. I was reclaiming moments, emotions, and precious connections with my family. Of course, it's important to be mindful. Not every sweet is healthy. I avoid industrial products packed with sugar, steer clear of sodas, and don't eat commercial cakes. Instead, a bit of dark chocolate or even a teaspoon of natural honey in my tea has become part of my daily routine. And it's not just about the taste. I do it because it helps me feel alive, clear-headed, and present. That's how I came to understand that pleasure and health are not mutually exclusive. Sometimes, when you choose wisely, sweet things can be healing too. Finally, though, the fifth food on my journey is both the most powerful and the simplest water. Throughout my life, I've heard about exotic foods, miracle supplements, and new diets that promise youth, memory, and energy. But after all these years, I've learned that the most transformative things are often the simplest and most accessible things we tend to overlook. That's exactly how it is with water. It may seem unimpressive to some, but I assure you when I started to drink water regularly and mindfully, my mind experienced a clarity I never expected. The brain needs to be hydrated to function at its best. Water doesn't just transport nutrients, it also removes toxins, regulates body temperature, keeps neural connections active, and improves blood flow to the brain. Sometimes, the simplest changes can have the most profound effects on our health and well-being. I used to be the kind of person who only drank water when I felt thirsty, a small glass here, another there, never really paying much attention to how much I was consuming. Sometimes, hours would pass without me even realizing I hadn't taken a sip. By the afternoon, I would feel sluggish and tired, my concentration would wane, and I'd struggle to find the right words when speaking. I always blamed it on my age, assuming that this was just another part of getting older. But the truth was, it wasn't simply age, it was dehydration. Recognizing this, I decided to make a change. I started each morning with a large glass of water as soon as I woke up, followed by another before breakfast. Throughout the day, I kept a small bottle of water with me, making a conscious effort to take sips regularly. Even if I didn't feel thirsty, it didn't take long for the effects to become noticeable. My mind felt clearer, I could recall names more quickly, and I was able to read without having to go over the same line repeatedly. I felt more alert and awake, as if a fog had been lifted from my brain. My mood also improved. I found myself feeling less confused and irritable, with a greater desire to engage in conversation, write, and learn new things. What's more, I realized that staying well hydrated amplified the benefits of all the other healthy foods I had incorporated into my diet. Without proper hydration, the body struggles to absorb nutrients effectively. The healthy fats from avocados, the vitamins from nuts, the flavonoids from dark chocolate, they all need a well-hydrated environment to work their magic. Water became the fertile ground that allowed these nutrients to nourish my brain. I also enjoyed mild infusions, such as green tea or rosemary tea, which provided additional antioxidants. Still, the foundation of my routine was always clean, fresh, natural water. It's easy to overlook something so simple, but sometimes the most powerful things in life are those we take for granted. Water doesn't have a spectacular flavor, nor is it marketed as a miracle cure. But without it, nothing in our bodies, especially our brains, can function properly. If you were to ask me today, which food has most transformed my mental clarity, energy, and enthusiasm for learning, I would answer without hesitation, water. It's the foundation, the starting point for everything. And the best part is that it's available to everyone, you, me, and anyone willing to make a small change. The changes I experienced went far beyond just memory improvement. When I first started making these adjustments to my lifestyle, my only real hope was to regain my memory, to remember names without effort, to stop misplacing my keys, to follow conversations without losing my train of thought. But what unfolded was much deeper and more transformative than I ever imagined. These foods and habits didn't just reawaken my mind, they revived something within me that had been dormant for years. The first change I noticed was in my mood. There were mornings when getting out of bed felt like a monumental task. I lacked motivation, felt dull, and each day seemed indistinguishable from the last. Gradually, however, I began to feel more positive and curious. I woke up with a renewed sense of energy and anticipation. That subtle excitement you get when you know there's something worthwhile to do or discover. Mental fatigue, which used to weigh me down after reading a little or watching the news, also started to disappear. My head no longer felt heavy, and my mind didn't tire so quickly. I found myself reading entire books again, no longer needing to reread every paragraph to grasp the meaning. I returned to writing in my notebook, and my thoughts flowed more freely and coherently. Perhaps one of the most remarkable improvements was in my sleep. For a long time, restful sleep eluded me. I would wake up several times during the night, struggle to fall back asleep, and often felt more exhausted in the morning than when I went to bed. But as I changed my diet, improved my hydration, and focused on real, nutrient-rich foods, my sleep gradually improved. It wasn't an instant fix, but it was steady and reliable. Now, I sleep more deeply and peacefully, waking up refreshed and ready for the day. I also noticed that the stress and anxiety that sometimes crept in for no apparent reason began to subside. They didn't vanish completely after all. I'm still human, but they no longer dominated my days. I feel more balanced, more at peace with myself and the world around me. Best of all, I found myself reconnecting with life. I became more engaged in conversations, interested in current events, and willing to share stories and memories with others without the fear of making mistakes. I even took the plunge and signed up for a short online history course, which I enjoyed with the enthusiasm of a child. While memory improvement was my initial motivation, the benefits extended far beyond that. Taking care of my mind also meant taking care of my spirit, opening myself to the present, and truly coming back to life. That, at any age, is a priceless gift. Looking back, I realize how much I've learned. At 85, I once believed my days of mental clarity were behind me. I thought it was normal to forget names, lose the thread of conversations, or enter a room and forget why. I assumed it was the beginning of the end, that my mind, like my body, would slowly shut down. What I didn't know was that it could also come back to life. It wasn't a miracle, and it didn't happen overnight, but it was real and it changed everything for me. In the beginning, I was simply grateful to remember what I'd had for lunch. That small victory was enough. But as time went on, I noticed more changes. Words started coming to me more easily, and I could connect ideas without struggling. Conversations flowed naturally, and I no longer felt like I was falling behind or losing track. One day, I surprised myself by completing an entire crossword puzzle without any help. On another occasion, I recalled the phone number of an old friend, a number I hadn't seen written down in years. But the most wonderful part wasn't just that my memory was returning, it was that my confidence was coming back. Two, I felt alive again, filled with a renewed eagerness to learn, to read, to have long, meaningful conversations with my grandchildren, and to laugh without forgetting the reason why. I could share stories without losing the thread, and I found joy in writing down my memories with clarity and pride. All of this began with something incredibly simple, making changes to what I put on my plate. I'm not talking about a miracle diet. There are no secret tricks or instant solutions. What I discovered was a path built on real, nourishing foods, consistency, hydration, curiosity, and most importantly, the determination not to give up. That's the lesson I want to share. Don't give up. If you're finding it harder to remember things, if your mind sometimes feels sluggish or cloudy, don't accept it as just the way things have to be. Start with a small change, one that you know you can stick with. Add a healthy food to your routine. Drink more water and let your brain breathe again. I made these changes at odd even if you're 60, 70, 90, or any age. You can do it. Two, what I've learned is that it's never too late to reawaken your mind. Never too late to take care of yourself, regain clarity, or feel that spark of life again. We may not be the people we were at 20, but we can still feel alive, attentive, and truly present. My story isn't unique, it's a possibility, and it's available to you as well. How about you? Have you noticed changes in your memory lately? Maybe you find it difficult to recall certain words. Or perhaps you forget small things from day to day. Or maybe you just sense that your mind isn't working as sharply as it once did. If so, you're not alone, and most importantly, you're not without options. Today, I've shared what worked for me, not because I have all the answers, but because I know what it feels like to look in the mirror and wonder, What's happening to me? I also know the joy of smiling again when a lost memory suddenly returns. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Share in the comments what foods you eat to care for your mind. Have you made any dietary changes that you've noticed? And please, tell me where you're watching from and how old you are. I'd love to read your story. Your story could inspire someone else, just as others inspired me when I needed it most. If this video helped you, please share it. Send it to a friend, a loved one, or anyone who sometimes feels it's too late to improve. Sometimes, all someone needs is a little hope. Thank you for being here, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.